Amid rising geopolitical tensions and a deepening north-south divide, the World Economic Forum brought together about 1,000 of global leaders and experts from government, business, international organizations, and even civil society organizations to chart a collective course towards a more stable, sustainable, and inclusive future. Now, the special meeting on global collaboration, growth, and energy for development 2024 was held under the patronage of His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, who is the Crown Prince and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. On the side, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, who was in attendance, met with a number of business leaders, including Bill Gates and delegates from Korea's Samsung and Denmark's Maersk. So to help us understand this better, I'm being joined by Olufemi Oladehin, who is the Senior Partner Argentine Capital Partners. Thank you so much, Oladehin, for joining us on Business Edge.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Let's start this way. Now, the World Economic Forum 2024 focused on charting a collective course towards a more stable, sustainable, and inclusive future. So tell us, how can that be achieved?
Look, thank you. You know that in the last probably 2 or 3 decades, we've seen the world effectively move from a situation where countries were mostly looking inwards to a more globalized economy. We've seen the benefits of that, not just from economic growth. The world has actually seen the longest sustained periods of GDP growth on a global scale. We've also seen significant improvements in trade policies and trade alignments across different geopolitical zones. Now, of course, in the last few years, we've seen significant pressures from the geopolitical areas. You know, the wars in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine, the continued crisis in Israel and the Middle East, as well as China, flexing its muscles across the globe. Now, the World Economic Forum was a fantastic opportunity for the world to hopefully press a reset button and ensure that we have a clear trajectory towards ensuring that the growth that we have now is not just inclusive, especially for the countries that have suffered significantly, like most of the continents of Africa and
Hello, Oladehin. I think we just lost communication with Oladehin right there. That should be a technical glitch that we are hoping will be rectified in no time. But then he's been talking about the geopolitical tensions as regards the Middle East. Of course, there are also other issues that has to do with the West and Russia and the fights that we've seen between Israel and Hamas. And of course, other issues, pocket of issues all across the globe, which are actually threatening the global agenda, talking about what needs to be done in terms of collaboration, growth, energy, sustainability, and development, looking at 2024 and beyond. So a lot of people have asked the questions, if we continue to have these tensions continue to brew, how will those issues be resolved, and how can the world attain cohesion in terms of a global agenda that can drive development for the world? Now, I'll go back to Oladehin. I want to believe that is right there. Oladehin, if you can hear me, I'd like you to just conclude on what you were talking about in terms of what needs to be done to achieve growth, looking at the trajectory and the focus of the participants or the players within the global stage that actually attended the World Economic Forum. Oladehin, can you hear me? Hello, Oladehin.
Hello, yes, sorry, I'm here now. Can you hear me?
Okay, fantastic. We can hear you now. So, yes, I was saying that I would like you to just conclude on what you were trying to highlight, looking at the geopolitical tensions and the dynamics associated with it, and the kind of cohesion that needs to be achieved. Because if we're talking about global collaboration, we're talking about growth, we're talking about energy development and sustainability, and we still continue to have this pocket of issues across the globe, then it will be hard to achieve. So what needs to be done to do away with those challenges and be able to forge ahead in terms of what the world, looking at the world powers come together and what they're hoping to achieve?
So, fair point. The truth is that we've known from time immemorial that geopolitical pressures are always something that we have to deal with. It's even increasingly more obvious when you look at the fact that geopolitical has now become economic. So countries are starting to realize that economic power is also more important, sometimes even more important than geopolitical control. However, the reality is that the world only does well when we're in seasons of peace and stability. And I think that there's a lot of responsibility on political leadership to ensure that we continue to look towards a world that has a peaceful background, that has a peaceful intuition around it. And I think that there are specific countries that need to play that active role. So you're talking again about the US, some of the countries in the EU, Russia, China, India, and Nigeria, from Africa's perspective, and probably South Africa. And it's important that each of those political blocks, each of those economic blocks, see the pathway towards ensuring that for the world to reduce the level of poverty, hunger, and strife that we're seeing, political leadership is fundamental in providing that guarantee.
Yeah, so let's pick it from that angle where you talked about political leadership and what needs to be done if, of course, they were able to scale what they've been able to achieve, scale it to the global stage and have a bit of synergy, and that can actually foster growth for the world. So we look at Nigeria now because it's one of the countries you mentioned. We know that President Bola Tinubu attended the Special World Economic Forum and he highlighted his economic policies, the removal of fuel subsidy, the floating of the naira, and some other economic policies that are brought on bed that, of course, a lot of economists are saying that they are quite harsh, looking at the pre-existing economic situation that the country is faced with. So if you're going to do an assessment of his speech, what he said, what he has achieved, how would you describe it?
So interesting. If you went on social media, you would actually think that you were listening to these two different speeches by one person. But here is the issue. President Bola Tinubu continues to tout some of the policy decisions that were taken last year. But I think it's only fair that whilst he takes credit for those policy issues, he should also take credit for the implications of those policy issues. Removal of fuel subsidy, well, partial removal of fuel subsidy in reality, and the relaxation of the forex market were positive, but they had a backlash. There was a concomitant implication towards those. And it's important that when he talks about that he also highlights those concomitant implications and then tell people what plans they have to be able to help economies like in Africa and Nigeria to recover from the implications of those reforms. Look, reforms are always going to be painful, but people must also see a clear pathway towards the benefits of those reforms. And I think in highlighting the importance of global support for a country like Nigeria, I think President Tinubu did the right thing in telling the world that, look, Nigeria is open for business, and it's important that the world continues to provide support to us as an economy. But look, at the end of the day, there are human beings who are the face of the economic policies that the government has created, and those people have to be taken into consideration.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about the $600 million investment in seaport infrastructure from Danish shipping company AP Moller-Maersk. Now, talk to us about the impact this would have on how important it is for Nigeria at this time, because I want to believe this particular group, I would put it, is one of the investors that are hoping to change the economic landscape of the country.
So, I mean, look, AP Moller have been very important in the Nigerian port industry for quite some time. In actual fact, they were one of the promoters of the proposed Badagry port. Now, that's clear. Interestingly, there is always, the jury is out. We all know that our ports have been extremely inefficient, and that has increased the cost of doing business for the average Nigerian corporate. So any investment that goes towards improving the efficiency of the ports would actually be beneficial, not just to the industries, but to the average Nigerian, because the benefits would immediately flow to the cost of doing business. And obviously, we hope that would help us taper inflation on the downbeat. Now, the point here is this: for Nigerian economy to actually go through the leaps and bounds we're expecting, we need more than one AP Moller. And that's why policy consistency is extremely important. Governments want to see, and businesses want to see, that Nigeria has come to stay when it comes to policy to policy consistency. That people want to be sure that what you say today is going to be consistent with what you say in 12 months' time. And that's where the major problem for the Nigerian government is. And I think if we are able to fix that, then we have an economy that we can be proud of in a short while.
But a lot of people have actually questioned the sincerity on the part of government in coming up with policies that are friendly, most especially with investors. We've seen a lot of international, global companies, of course, that actually existed in Nigeria, now leaving the shores of the country. So if we're talking about policies and we have a president who's trying to woo more investors, but then we are seeing an economic ecosystem that is stifling the growth and the revenue drive of these companies to the point that they begin to leave the country. How do we now achieve the global, not even global now, how do we now achieve the grand scheme in terms of an economy that is buoyant, sustainable, and is friendly to accommodate these businesses?
So honestly, the easy answer to that always has to be the infrastructure base and the structural construction of the country. You know, the biggest problem we have is when companies come into Nigeria, they literally have to do things they wouldn't have to do in other countries. They have to provide their own power. They have to ensure that they sometimes even provide their own transport infrastructure, provide their own distribution infrastructure. In most other climates, some of these things are already in place. If I moved to the UK to start a business today, I don't have to move my goods on the road. I can put my goods on a train and they would get to wherever it is I want to send them to. So you see, the truth is that for us to have an economy that solves or that becomes the economy we're all looking forward to, there are certain infrastructural deficits and that have introduced structural issues into our economy that we need to fix. So one of those is power. One of those is our transport infrastructure. One of those is healthcare. You know, so there are basic things that we need to fix. The quality of our education. What are our graduates capable of being hired by these industries? And if government does not look at that holistic solution, all we're going to be doing is exactly what I've always said: applying Band-Aid to a cancer. Applying Band-Aid to a cancer is not going to cure the cancer. For you to cure cancer, you have to graft it, you have to do chemotherapy, you have to do very strong things. And I think that's what we should be asking government to do. So don't apply Band-Aid to our problems. We know what our problems are. Give us a plan that clearly identifies solutions to those problems. When business sees that, business is going to invest. One of the things we must always remember is that investors don't make emotional decisions. Every investor is going to make a pure economic decision, and those economic decisions are based on the structure of the economy. And if Nigeria wants to attract them, then we need to make the economy more sustainable from a structural perspective.
Okay. Now, the president also spoke highly about the foreign exchange markets, saying that the reforms have removed artificial value and reduced corruption. However, the much desired stability seems to have eluded us. So what do you make of this statement?
Well, so I mean, the truth is that the Naira is trying to find its level, given the fact that we've artificially propped it up for such a long time. Now that journey is going to be a difficult and choppy one. However, again, it comes back to one theme: policy consistency. If the policies are consistent, if the rhetoric and the messaging from the central bank are consistent and market-driven, you know, you will see an economy and a Naira that eventually stabilizes around what the market thinks is its true level. But a market that, a currency that devalues 40% in 1 week has definitely not found its level. And that's because there is really nothing backing it. Now, I would say this: I think the central bank governor made a bit of a boo-boo in a speech about 2 weeks ago, in the sense that you have to understand that the market listens to everything you say. And nuance is also very important in driving market sentiment. We need positive sentiments around the Naira at this point in time. And the rhetoric that comes out from government has to always be that our desire is to have a stronger currency, even though the journey to get there might be a choppy one. But once the market has that at the back of its mind, then it can make long-term policy decisions. So right now, we're going to continue to have a very volatile market, simply because people are trading the Naira on a spot basis. The moment we get to the point where people can start to look down the barrel and see a forward market for the Naira, then you are going to see significantly more stability.
Mm. Okay, Olufemi Oladehin, Senior Partner, Argentine Capital Partners. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with
Always
us
a pleasure.
on the show. Appreciate
Always
that.
a pleasure.